the Reconstructionist Radio Podcast Network presents Worldview Media Podcast, where Gordon and Joyce Runyon view popular media through the lens of the biblical five-point covenant model to help believers appreciate and apply principles of exciting narrative and engaging storytelling.
Hello and welcome to this hilarious, exciting episode of Worldview Media Podcast. We are here to discuss the Netflix original series Stranger Things.
And there have been stranger things happen on this podcast.
Yeah. And I urge you to stand by after the podcast for a short blooper reel.
Courtesy of your host,
I have not been drinking.
Your host, Demigorgon.
With me in studio are two ladies who spend most of their time in the upside down. There you go. You can't just keep laughing.
I'm not laughing. Keeping it together.
All right, and this is my wife Joyce, who's trying not to laugh.
Hello.
And our youngest daughter, Reagan. Hello, Reagan.
Hello.
And I am your host, Gordon Runyon.
That's right. 100%.
All right. If you knew how much fun we were having, you'd know it's probably more than is available in this series. No, we're talking about Stranger Things, and it really is a pretty fun little show. It's 8 episodes on Netflix right now, with a new season set to premiere later this year, 2017. And let's recap this just a little bit. It's a little bit of a complex story, but at the center of it, you have a missing middle school aged kid. Mm-hmm. And we come to find out early on that he's been kidnapped and taken out of this world, actually, by a monster that the kids call the Demigorgon.
Ah, yes.
And he's pretty nasty, and there's kind of shades of the movie Alien in there and stuff like that, but big bad villain. And then after the kidnapping of this kid, the story kind of proceeds on 3 tracks. You have a adult track and a teenage track, and then the middle school track. And on the adult track, you have the kid's mom, who is...
Another Joyce?
Yeah, not quite as lovely Joyce. Joyce Byers is the mom of Will Byers, who was kidnapped. I believe she's played by Winona Ryder.
That's right.
And she kind of goes crazy with the loss of her boy and has a hard time making it through.
Well, she's a single parent, too, so she's got a hard time anyway.
Yeah, so she kind of obviously looks to everybody else like she's cracking under the stress. And coming to her aid is the local sheriff, Jim Hopper, who had his own young daughter die due to cancer, and that we learn over the course of the series that tragedy probably wound up destroying his marriage, and he kind of descended into some troubles with alcohol as a result. But he's on the job now, and he's helping Joyce Byers look for Will. They might have called him Willie sometimes. All right, so that's the adult track. The sheriff and Joyce trying to find the boy. And then the teenage track is Mike's older... wow. We haven't introduced Mike yet. But the teenage track is a teenage girl named Nancy. And she's kind of a rebellious teenage girl trying to figure out who she is in the world and all that. And she spends a lot of time trying to figure that out in relation to this too cool sort of guy named Steve, who's very popular.
Mm-hmm.
And she's not as popular. He's very popular.
She's very smart.
Yeah, she's a bookworm. And then
Will has an older brother.
yeah, the missing kid, Will, has an older brother named Jonathan, who's a good photographer, kind of a recluse in personality and kind of withdrawn. And
Yeah.
but he turns out to be a better guy for Nancy to be with than too cool Steve. All right, so
That's the teen track.
that's the teen track, and they eventually begin looking on their own for Will. And then you have the other track, which is Will's three friends, and they're kind of the stars of the show as far as I'm concerned, or
Right.
the scenes that have those three boys in
Yeah.
it are the most fun. And these guys are Mike and Dustin and Lucas.
Mm-hmm.
Now the weird thing that happens at the first then is a girl their age with a kind of a shaved head or very severe crew cut head kind of seems to escape from somewhere, like she's been held captive somewhere. And she doesn't talk very much, can't talk very much at first, at least.
She doesn't communicate really.
She has a very limited vocabulary, and she's kind of learning words as they go along. But she quickly turns out to have maybe something's off about her, and turns out she's got like psychokinetic powers. Mm-hmm. She can do lots of weird things with her mind. And she has bad guys who are government agents chasing after her.
Are they really government agents, or are they just people working for the labs? Where she's
I was under the
escaped from?
impression that they were government.
I think the labs were in a government facility. They weren't soldiers or anything, but I think they mentioned the lab was Department of Energy, DOE. And so the DOE has got this secret lab where they're doing weird things, and it takes kind of the whole series to figure out the depths of what they're doing. And I'm not sure we even get it all figured out by the end.
Yeah.
And so those are the three tracks, and each group is kind of using their own means and their own tools available to them to try to look for Will. And I would just say, to start off in an overall sense, I think it's super well done. The storytelling, I think, is really neat. And, I just did a bad job explaining a complex way of telling the story, but they keep it all together, and it's really good. And then eventually all those three tracks intertwine and join. And
work together to try to solve the situation.
Yeah, and so it's really good. And the other thing that I like, that a lot of viewers have liked, is that somehow they really made this movie or this series, it felt like a conglomeration of a whole bunch of really popular movies from the 80s, and it had a really strong 80s feel to it.
Yeah.
And
Well, that's the other thing about it, is that it's the time setting is different than what you might think, and they did capture that really well with the scenes and the clothing and just the real feel of what that was like.
Yeah, you and I were teenagers in the 80s, and so that was like our heyday era. But if you wanted me to make a 80s movie, I'm not sure what I would put there to say, oh yeah, this is classic 80s. But they did a good job of that. Especially the track with the three friends. It felt like every movie from the 80s, E.T. and what's the other? Lean on Me.
Is that Stand By Me?
Stand By Me. Felt a lot like the song. Or the Goonies, or Gremlins. It had that. Everything had that kind of feel to it. So it was It was really pretty interesting. So that was my take, that it was really well done. And I think the other thing that it did really well is it spanned a gamut between being really funny and cute in places and then becoming nearly like a
Really
horror
dark,
movie.
yeah.
And where it was actually scary and terrifying and stuff. And it would run that gamut within the same episode. You know,
Yeah.
there would be places where it's just super funny. And so for me, I really liked it. I'd kind of recommend it. There's no cussing or, you know.
Well, there's a little bit
Is
of
there?
cussing. It's mild.
Okay. Well, it didn't strike me. I guess it
For
didn't
your
stick
sailor
with
ears,
me.
it
Right.
probably
But, you know, there's no, in this series, though, there was no, you know, no explicit sex or anything. And the violence that was there was kind of comic book kind of violence. And,
Well, some of it was a little intense. So.
well, yeah, in terms of the horror movie
Yeah.
element of it. Yeah. I mean, it was monster violence and
Yeah.
stuff. So anybody else want to give kind of overall impressions if I haven't said what you want to say or what? What'd you think, Myron?
Well, I liked it. I wasn't really sure I was going to like it because it is kind of different, and just with where the time is set, you know, sometimes that's kind of hokey and more contrived. But I think this really it fit it nicely for the time frame they were looking at. I think the characters were really very believable. I loved the friends, the three friends. Their interactions were just really honest. You know, it seemed like they were three friends, three young kids that, you know, are just being goofballs trying to figure things out. And so that was really, really good. And then, of course, with the addition of the little girl that is just kind of like, well, what are we going to do with her? Well, let's take her home.
Yeah, right.
So-
Which is weird enough. You've got these three kind of goofy, nerdy boys who probably don't have much. They're probably weird dealing with girls anyway.
Yeah.
But then you bring in this girl, and as far as we know, her name is 11. That's what she says her name is. And they start calling her Elle. And she's not just a normal girl they'd be weird enough around anyway, but she's got weird things going on. And so it makes it even weirder for them trying to interact with her.
And you do get to learn a little bit more about her backstory because as they're looking for
Answers.
Will and answers, they uncover some other information about the doctor, and so it really is a really good series. And I was real happy to hear that they're doing a season 2. I wondered.
Kind of left on a bad note.
Well, you know, sometimes it's just like, well, okay, is this over? Or do we have room to go farther? And so it was.
It left on an ominous note, I guess. Yeah. All right, Reagan, you have anything to say?
I liked it. It took me, well, just generally, it kind of takes me a little bit of time to get into a show. I'm not a huge person to start new shows and then finish them. But I actually did make it through this series, and it picked up pace pretty quickly. So it was easy to watch and interesting to watch, and you just wanted to keep on watching.
Yeah.
It was some good storytelling and good characters and chemistry between everybody. And
Right.
I think there were some interesting things that happened that every episode that would make
you say,
you
what's coming next?
Right.
Yeah. They were good at that.
It's a well done show.
All right. You ready to take our break? And then we'll come back and talk more.
We'll take a break.
Okay, we'll take a break. Here we go. Stick with us.
The Reconstructionist Radio Podcast Network brings to you a complete lineup of podcasts where you will hear practical and tactical theology. Our desire is not simply that you consume our shows, but that you also live out your faith in every area of life. We can talk all day long about these things, but if we fail to put them into practice, then we fail as ambassadors of Jesus Christ our King. Subscribe now to your favorite Reconstructionist Radio Podcast Network shows, or you can subscribe to the Reconstructionist Radio Master Feed, where all of the content we produce, including the audiobooks and audio articles, will pop up as soon as they are available. And don't forget to visit ReconstructionistRadio.com to volunteer as a narrator or to partner with this ministry financially. May the Holy Spirit stir you into action for Christ and His kingdom.
And we're back. We're talking about Stranger Things on Netflix, and we're at the point of the show where we start taking the media in question through a comparison with the biblical 5-point covenant model in search of worldview material and to figure out what is it that's being preached to us through this story. Now, the first point of the biblical covenant is transcendence, and we start speaking here about who's really in charge of the world in which this story takes place, and how do we know that? Who's the ultimate lawgiver? Who's the creator? Are there characters who are redeemed, and how are they redeemed? Because that points to transcendence as well. And so here in the movie, or in the series Stranger Things, I'm open to being corrected if you guys have anything for me, but I feel like it's the movie is kind of based on a theory of materialistic naturalism. It's kind of very scientific evolution. Evolution doesn't play a big role in it, but I'm saying that's just kind of the worldview, an evolutionary worldview. And then we start talking about theoretical multiple dimensions and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But I think that whole melee is, there's no, I don't think the series points to anything really being in charge other than, this is just the way it is.
Kind of a random.
Randomness.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I'd have to agree with you. As I was thinking about you asking the question, I was like, because there really isn't anybody in charge. There's nobody that is giving them direction. It's just they kind of stumble along and hope for the best. And even with the little girl, as we go through the series, we kind of realize what happened, and it was just all very accidental that this other dimension, the upside down, was opened and made available to these regular people,
right,
to access. So I think it's just you kind of want to say, yeah, somebody's in charge, but no,
there's no sign of that. Really.
Not really.
Maybe next season we'll see something.
Oh, right.
But as of right now, I think it's pretty
kind of secular,
random.
Yeah, and it is really heavy on science. It's nothing that they can prove, but it's stuff that they're doing in labs, and with this little girl and how she came about being and her powers, and
they're always doing experiments on her.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'd have to agree with you. Very naturalistic view.
Yeah, the only thing that I think on this note is that one of the thematic things of it seems to be that you can't trust anybody in power, or you can't trust anybody who has authority. And I get that from the way the three friends, for instance, they quickly decide, we can't tell anybody about this. We can't tell our parents. We've got to hide it from them because they'll just mess it up. And it's pretty obvious they're right about that.
Yeah.
And they're just going to, if the parents do get a shot at figuring out what to do with Elle, they'll just turn her in to the authorities, and that's the wrong thing to do.
That's the wrong place for her to be. And I don't even think they realize that themselves. I think the focus really with them in the beginning is our friend. You help us find our friend.
Yeah.
And I think they develop a relationship with Elle and then realize that, oh, you're in a bad place.
Right.
And so that
they're wanting
evolves
her.
around, but it's mostly on the focus of their friend to begin with. And even with the mom, Joyce, she knows something weird's going on, and she's trying to tell everybody herself, and nobody believes her.
Everybody just thinks she's crazy, kind of writes her off.
She's she's cracked, you know. Oh my gosh, she lost her son, and she will never be the
went off
same.
the rails.
Or she's destroying her house. And
There goes
Yeah.
Joyce. And so that happens.
yeah. And so I almost felt like that was thematic, that the people that you would think you ought to be able to trust and look to for help, in this world you really can't. You gotta, with the lone exception being the sheriff, maybe.
And I think he comes along reluctantly. I think he kind of says, wait, there is some weird stuff going on here.
Right.
Yeah, I'll help you. I don't know where this is going to lead us, but I'll help you.
But even he, as he gets more right, you know, as he deals with things in a better way as the story goes along, that means rebelling against authority. You know, he's got to paint outside the lines in order to
Right.
figure anything out here.
And he's not telling anybody
No,
what he's doing.
that's right.
Yeah, you know, I think he actually breaks into the lab and kind of
sure.
says, wait, this is really weird.
Right. In violation of all sorts of rules and laws or
Yeah.
whatever. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so that's unfortunate. I felt like the transcendence thing really isn't a thing. It's kind of a secular backdrop for everything.
But even saying that, I don't think there's anything wrong with questioning authority figures.
Oh, right, sure.
You know, you
or
can't,
not trusting them.
Yeah, you can't just blindly accept what anybody tells you.
Sure.
You know, you have to know what you believe and what you think and why you think those things. And I think that's really just a problem in our society right now, period, is that too many people say, oh, yeah, that's true.
Right. The government says it must be true.
It's on the internet.
Right. Our government would never do anything
They
horrible.
wouldn't lie to us.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is prevalent. And so as far as that goes, I'm glad to have stuff like this series that kind of keeps perpetuating that idea that, hey, just because they've got authority doesn't mean they
Right.
know what they're doing or anything like that. In fact, they may even be in on it.
Yeah.
Which they turn out to be here. Okay, so then that kind of leads to point 2 of the covenant in terms of hierarchy and representation. In the biblical covenant, we know that God is the transcendent power, but the biblical covenant places men in positions of authority where they represent God and his transcendence. And so in the Bible you get like kings and priests and prophets and pastors and elders and moms and dads and stuff like that in order to that's the way society is ordered. That's the way the covenant is ordered. So here in this story then, if the transcendent power is the sort of stuff that we've just been talking about, who kind of embodies that or represents that? And for me, I think we've mentioned a lot. I think it's a thematic thing. It runs through a lot of them. You know, the teenage girl, what's her name? Nancy.
Mm-hmm.
She's got that idea that she's going to have to pursue this mystery on her own, and because one of her own friends gets kidnapped by the monster too, and so she's looking for Barb.
Yeah.
and she does it on her own with help from Jonathan, Will's brother, and then you have Nancy, and like we said, even the sheriff, not Nancy, Joyce and the sheriff, and then the 3 kids, and so they all kind of represent this thematic thing.
Well, for me, I really see Elle as that representation.
Oh, Elle herself.
Yeah, because, you know, she is that experiment that has caused all this stuff to happen, and the more you look at what her story is, and for me, it's sad because, you know, she calls this doctor guy dad, and she wants to do anything she can to please him, and
he hates her.
You know, he certainly isn't like a father figure, and so it's her plight is really a little disturbing for me, but I see her as being the representative of that naturalistic society, because she's just something that's used to further the agenda of whomever those in power are.
She's got nobody
Yeah.
when this begins. Right. Yeah, that's very interesting. I think that's probably right. Do you have any other ideas?
I'd agree with you.
Okay. And then the third point of the covenant is ethics. In the biblical covenant, this is where we get the laws. You shall do this, you shall not do this, and it explains the responsibilities of those who are in the covenant. So in the media, you're rarely going to find a movie that lays out a law, but one of the ways that we've found to kind of discern what's going on is to ask about major moral or ethical dilemmas that are faced by our characters and how they seem to address those. And I think one of the real easy ones to look at is the one we talked about, where Joyce, the mom of the missing kid, really has an uphill battle to try to get anybody to listen to her, and really I think part of her dilemma is having to deal with questions about, am I crazy like everybody else thinks I am? And,
Yeah.
I think that my missing son is speaking to me through blinking lights in the house and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And
seeing things come out of the wall.
right. And so it really does become a moral dilemma at some point when you're challenged like that, because you have to have a grasp on what you really believe to be real and what is not real. And that, at the bottom, that's an ethical or moral dilemma. And she faces that in a way that, again, is consistent with the other worldview stuff in here. She's hanging with her perception of reality in spite of what everybody around her is telling her. She's not just going to trust what trustworthy people around her might tell her.
Well, and then during the series, they actually produce her son, supposedly, and say, well, he's dead,
Oh, right.
Yeah.
They try to trick her.
Yeah. He's not here anymore, and here's his body, and you look through that window at him. And, so, that was a really difficult place for her to be in.
Yeah.
And still say, no, I'm not going to trust what you tell me.
Especially when her son and her ex-husband and the rest of the town
was like, oh, we're so sorry.
Right.
Well, because that's more believable. I mean,
who would create a fake son?
Yeah, who would do that? And where's this place that your other kid is? And how did he get there?
Right.
And, yeah.
Right. Well, for me, too, a similar sort of thing is faced by the three friends. Mm-hmm. Because they believe they know something that nobody else knows, and that kind of because their imaginations are willing to move in areas of alternate worlds and fantasy lands.
Yeah.
But they know that the adults aren't going to go there, and so they're very willing to believe the truth about where Will is, and they know nobody's going to do this but us. And so that becomes a moral dilemma, hiding these things from mom and dad and stuff like that. That's a pretty significant moral issue. Yeah. Hiding this girl who says that this is her story and stuff. Well, here we go.
I don't think she really shares a lot about herself with the
well,
boys.
Right. She doesn't say much, but it's obvious that she's got...
It's obvious that things aren't quite normal.
Yeah,
so.
Right. So interesting. And the other moral dilemma I think that is faced throughout this series is the teenage girl Nancy and her infatuation with Steve. That you kind of, I believe you're supposed to get the hint right off the bat that this guy's not going to be good for her. And her mom's telling her.
Her friends
are telling her, you need to watch what you're doing. And she's rebelling just for the sake of rebelling in certain places. And I think by the end of the series, she kind of gets that figured out.
She's figured that, yeah. And I think even that character changes a little bit through the process, and maybe he's not quite the same guy he was at the beginning.
Yeah, the too cool Steve. Yeah. He, I was just reading online that apparently he's going to be a normal, regular character in season 2. And he kind of finds a little bit of a heroic streak buried underneath all the coolness and stuff.
All the hair gel.
Yeah, the hair gel. Right.
So,
Okay. Any other ideas? Ethical dilemmas?
I think something that has struck me is that the place where Will goes is the upside down world. Is it
Yeah.
just
Dimension.
It's just
or-
another dimension.
just upside down? And that he's in a place that we really don't ever really see.
Yeah.
But the people that are looking for him, their worlds really get turned upside down on this side, in that trying to find him and holding on to know he's somewhere and we have to save him. And so that upside down component really kept them right side up here, you know?
Yeah,
that,
interesting. Yeah.
That was just like, you know, it wasn't just on that other side where he was, it was
Yeah.
actually here as well, that it was upside down.
That's interesting. Kind of metaphorically parallel there, that the only people who are right side up are the ones who believe in the upside down.
Yeah.
Right. The underside.
And didn't sit on their undersides.
All right. Okay. So that's pretty cool. And then let's see, we get to point 4 of the covenant was sanctions. And if you keep the rules and you do what you're supposed to do, what's the result in this covenant? Or if you break the rules, what can you expect? And so as we're looking at fiction here, we start wondering, do the characters, are they rewarded according to the way the world works? And how are they rewarded? Well, obviously they find Will at the end.
Right.
But it takes, on many points, it takes a willingness from all the characters to risk themselves. And there's a lot of either defying death or being willing to die in order to get Will back. And
Well, they all have to combine their forces. So it's not just the kids doing this. It's not just the adults doing this. They all have to work together to get him back.
Yeah, once they kind of joined back up together, I feel like there were all these individual pieces of puzzles, and once they came together, kind of everything sort of fit, and all the little pieces that each of them had found came
more
together.
sense.
Right. Yeah, and so there's a big reward or sanction by holding tough and believing what they believed and not being swayed. They finally got Will back, and so that was a good thing.
Yep.
And I almost felt like there was redemption there for the sheriff as well. You know, at the end, he's not drinking like he was at the beginning.
Right.
And
Well, and I think you see that for Will's family, that they seem stronger at the end and maybe more normal.
oh yeah, right.
Is that crazy?
Well,
They're
more
normal.
open. Yeah.
Well, they just seem,
More together.
yeah, it's not as fragmented, their
yeah,
home. And
that's right.
it just seems more normal, you know, a
Right.
mom and her kids, and sure, same kind of problems and stuff, working, school, all that, but they just seem more normal.
Yeah. Okay. And there were bad guys who wind up getting what they deserved.
Did they get enough?
Yeah. That's a thing to be thought about. I mean, most of them, the bad guys I'm thinking of, wind up dead here in this world.
Right.
I almost felt like it would have been poetic for them to
Have gone
be trapped in the
Upside down.
upside down.
the other side.
You don't want to be trapped in the underside. so, but I thought that would have been
Yeah.
just and
Yeah.
right. They're the ones who open up the portal to this horrible place. Maybe they're the ones that should wind
Yeah.
up there, you know.
Well, and I think you see that the character Elle kind of taking responsibility for all this stuff happening and saying it was my fault.
Yeah, it wasn't her fault, though,
Well,
in a
but that's,
moral sense.
Yeah, that's how she kind of saw everything. And, you know, when she gets rid of the Demigorgon at the end. And,
Yeah.
and then, you know, so it doesn't seem like she gets what she should deserve because, you know, she's just kind of been a pawn in this whole
Right.
thing. And
None of it was her choice or
Yeah.
decision.
Well,
really.
that's what I was going to point out in a judicial sense, in terms of criminals getting what they deserve. No, she didn't get what she deserved, but there is a real sense in what Reagan said was right. She spent her whole life being a slave. Mm-hmm. I mean, honestly, slave in the strictest sense of the word.
Yeah.
Having no autonomy, no ability to make decisions for herself. And so for her to win the final battle by making that choice that she's going to sacrifice herself in order to save her friends that she never had, and or that she never spent her life knowing what that was. To me, I felt like she did find freedom right there at the last. It was a bit that didn't last very long, but she did express her freedom, and she took control where she had been controlled, and and she took charge over the thing that had scared her for however many years, and so I felt like she kind of did win the day. And it also made me realize it's kind of commonplace in our movies for heroes to sacrifice themselves. And I just kind of wonder if that would be true if it weren't for Christ and the Bible. Yeah. I think that if you read like pagan literature, like stuff coming from the early Anglo-Saxons and Vikings and stuff like that, stories of the ancient gods like Thor and the Greek gods, you don't see the gods sacrificing themselves.
Yeah.
They're harsh and cruel and self-centered. It's really only after Christ comes that now it becomes a noble thing.
It's heroic to sacrifice
the
yourself.
Hero
for the
is the
greater
one.
good.
Yeah. And I think it was, I forget who it was. This is on a different topic, but the first Thor movie that came out, if you remember that, where Thor was denied being in charge of his kingdom like he should have been until he could prove that he was worthy.
Yeah.
And the way he proved that he was worthy is his willingness to sacrifice himself for weak people around him and stuff like that. And once he showed he was willing to do that and die for other people, then he was exalted to the throne, And but original Norse thunder god Thor never did anything like that, And so the fact that it's a thing now that good guys, heroes, sacrifice themselves for their loved ones, I think that's a totally Christian concept, and the people who write these stories, I'm not saying they have that in their mind, in the forefront of their mind.
But that's where it comes
from.
from.
It's there. It's part of our culture now.
Yeah.
And it's part of the dominion of Christ. That storytellers today who are not seeking to honor Christ write stories that harken back to the sacrifice of Christ.
Yeah.
And another instance of that sort of dominion that I like is the fact that this is completely different, but I love this. This is just going to be stupid for me to even mention, but I think it's neat how Caesar used to be such a nightmare guy to Christians.
Yeah.
He was the ultimate big bad guy, Caesar was.
Yeah.
And now, for Christians nowadays, Caesar is a type of salad.
It's a dressing.
It's a dressing. And to me, what does that say? Dominion of Christ. He's reduced this ultimate bad guy that terrified his people for centuries.
Bowl of lettuce.
Yeah. Now the only time we say his name is when we're ordering a certain type of salad. And I just think that's kind of funny. And I just feel like the kingdom of God is like leaven, that you don't know how it's spreading through the lump of dough, but it does. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it does without you even trying to make it do that.
Yeah.
And this is an instance, I think, just this prevalence of self-sacrifice in our heroes. I think that's a Christian concept that's permeating how the whole world tells stories.
Yeah.
So praise God.
Well, I'd agree with that. But I still don't think she got what she deserved.
Oh, no. In a judicial sense, that's true. Judicially.
So, or it doesn't look like she got what she deserved.
Right. I guess
We don't know.
the type of story that it is,
is
that it's
stranger.
open-ended.
Yeah.
She's gone from here, but does that mean she's gone completely? We don't. Kind of hard to say.
I would guess no.
You think she's coming back?
I mean, there's another season. I think we're gonna see some more supernatural.
We'll see.
Maybe we'll see 11 again. Maybe we'll meet at 12. I don't know.
Oh,
Yeah, I always wondered about 11. What does this mean?
does that mean they've kidnapped 10 other babies?
I don't know.
And wow. But that's something to think about too. That idea that here would be the government actually kidnapping a baby and running experiments on her for, 12 years probably by the time this show starts.
Yeah.
And just using her. That's what you get with a secular worldview, where if you have the power to do a thing, then you can do the thing.
Yeah,
and there's nothing that stops you.
Makes right.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I can do it.
Yeah. And that kind of is all over this show, too. The only rule is what you can do and get away with.
Yeah.
Whether for good or ill.
Mm-hmm. And I think you see that a little bit with the story of Elle's mom, her supposed mother.
Oh, yeah.
That she said, no, I had a kid. No, you didn't.
Right.
Your baby didn't live and whatever.
And then they tried to do the same thing to Joyce whenever.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. She was kind of on the same track as Joyce.
And makes me think they've probably done that a few times.
Right. Yeah.
So
That's right. Yeah. Interesting storytelling there. Okay, so we get to point 5 of the covenant, which is succession. And this is where we ask the question, from what we've seen of the story, how is this world going to go on? Are there going to be changes, or what do we see in the future? Now, there is a second season coming, and this season ended on a pretty icky, ominous note with regard to Will. Not everything is right.
Right.
With
There's
Will.
still some repercussions.
You may have an alien thing going on, something growing in him, looks to me like. And so that sets up the need for a new season to continue telling that story. But like you said, I think there were family relationships that were obviously mended. And
also the relationship between Nancy and Jonathan and Steve all together.
Right.
Because there was some conflict between the three of them.
Yeah.
And now it's kind of, at the end of the season, you could see, they get along now. Like, things are
a little better.
Yeah.
Yeah, will the romantic drama continue to be there?
Oh, you gotta have romantic
You
drama.
gotta have a love triangle.
You gotta have that.
Or
for the
are they
next
just
season.
an older version of the Friends now?
I don't know. I actually don't know. I don't necessarily want to see it turn into a dramatic love triangle, actually.
Yeah,
I think Jonathan and Nancy are good for each other as friends. And I think if that progressed kind of naturally without the writers having to force anything, that would be good. But I think it's good where they are now.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. And is there a future between Joyce and Hopper? That almost looks like, well, duh, it has to be.
Yeah.
Well, can't they just be friends?
Right. But the issue, where the conflict comes from is, of course, that bad lab and the bad scientists that were in charge of it. As far as I can tell,
That's remaining.
a lot of tax money is going to go toward fixing things up at the lab and probably restarting experiments,
At
unless
least
something.
continuing whatever they were doing.
If
there.
not those experiments, then other ones.
Yeah, because you don't really see any implications for the lab.
Right.
Negative,
Other than the individuals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nothing negative against the corporation.
I worked for the Department of Energy. Well, actually, that's wrong. When I was in the Navy and I was a teacher at a nuclear power prototype in Idaho, the DOE ran that whole facility, even though the Navy was there. The DOE was in charge. Mm-hmm. And there were a couple of times late at night on the mid shift that and sometimes a friend of mine wouldn't have much to do, and we'd start exploring in this facility and stuff. And there were guards with guns walking around and stuff. And I found some strange places. I mean, not like
Stranger
in this. I didn't find that kind of stranger thing, but there was more to that place than met the eye.
Yeah, than what you would expect.
Deep, cavernous, underground facilities that they didn't tell us about. I found some of that,
And now this is being
And
sent
now
out
I'm just
all over
saying
the
it.
airwaves.
All right, we're cutting this part out.
And we live in Mexico.
Right. All right, so this has been Bill Evans for the... anybody else have anything? Okay, so we'll go ahead and end, just encouraging you to listen to the media you listen to. You almost can't escape it in our world. But listen to these things with covenant ears and be watchful. And not just because you're scared of what you might hear, but because as we sit and analyze these things, it really should teach us how to go on and be storytellers. We are supposed to be preaching a worldview too. And in all our creative endeavors, let's get that done. That's part of extending the kingdom of Christ. Extending the Word of God to every area of life.
Amen.
All right, so we'll see y'all next week. God bless you. Bye.
Bye.
Hello, and welcome to this exciting episode of the Worldview Media Podcast. Shouts and cheers. Shouts and cheers. This week we are talking about the Netflix original series Stranger Things. And with me in the studio are two ladies who spend most of their time on the underside. That ain't right. What's it called? The upside down.
That ain't right.
The upside down. Oh boy.
Good start.
And I am your host, the big bad Demigorgon.
You said that.
That should be Demigorgon.
Demo.
Hire you for all your demo needs.
Oh boy. Let's try this again.
Guess you spend a lot of time sitting down.
You're crying.
You guys are no help.
You're the one doing it.
Mess up on both.
What is it? It's not underside. It's
Upside down.
upside down. Well, Mom said underside, and it confused me. Oh man.
Demi?
Demigorgon.
Like a demigod. A
Demigorgon. Demogorgon.
All right. Here we go.
Thank you for listening to the Worldview Media Podcast. Please visit reconstructionistradio.com to check out the other podcasts in our network and to download our free audiobooks.